You are not guaranteed that everything will run smoothly 24/7, 365 days for the next 10 years. You're not guaranteed that. You're going to have dips. You're going to have high points and low points. And it is this belief that I am on a journey with my creator and I can't mess up. That is the most powerful element in that entire domain.
Wherever you are tuning in from, thank you for liking, for subscribing. It really helps with the algorithm, helping us to bring on bigger and better guests, to grow our team and our organization. So truly, thank you for your support. And here's the episode.
And truly the one hope that I'm praying into for anyone listening to this is that they glean inspiration from the amount of faith that you have. So something really special about you is that you have so much background in biblical study. So you have your bachelor's in biblical studies, you have your master's in divinity, and you have your master's in psychology. And you were even going towards getting your master's in clinical psychology, I believe, and God rerouted you. So I'd love if we can just start there with you sharing a bit about how God has routed you since then, and just start us off with where that path has been taking you.
Yeah, that's a great conversation. I finished, I guess, all those degrees in 2022. So that's like 10 years of higher education. And, God's graced me and given me the favor to complete that in 4. So I found myself in a very unique and yet strange position where I finished so much education, but I'm having difficulty finding a job, right? And for some might be able to relate with that story, where after you finish schooling, you think that you're able to go and find a job and have some level of financial security, and you don't have that. And so what's interesting is I lived in Philly most of my life, and I was in fact moving to Virginia to do my doctorate in clinical psychology, right? And that was the next step in my academic journey. And what's interesting is that I look back in hindsight and I find it funny. I was merely using academia as an outlet to release the energy that I was created with. And now I come to find out that it was business, and where like I enjoy the challenge, the risk, the ability to create, the spontaneity that comes with innovation, and all of those things that were part of my spiritual DNA and the way that God has wired me was for business. But I didn't know that because I didn't know what my name was. I didn't know what my identity was. And so I found myself just pumping out degrees left and right at a rate that I thought was like, I look back and I'm like I didn't click for me. It's like, I would consider myself to have some level of intelligence, but it didn't click for me because I didn't have that connection of why was I created? There's this quote, right? The most important days of your life, the day that you're born and the day you find out why, right? And the day that you find out why is the day that it changes the trajectory of your life. Because you now know why you exist on this earth, what you were made for. And like I was actually doing my doctorate, which was, again, another outlet for me to increase the challenge and expend my energy. But like a year into that, I soon realized, I'm wired differently. But, God somehow positioned me to be in a way that I was connected with multiple businesses. And I realized I actually really enjoy this. Right. I love the challenge of building a business. I love the challenge of taking something that's a couple $100,000 a month and assisting and scaling that to doing several $1 million a month. I love that experience. And so it's in that moment, I had a watershed moment. It's like, what do I really want out of my life? Then I decided, you know what? Burn the boats, right? Let me go full into building for the kingdom and making that effort, or making that stride to create a product or a service or a business that actually glorifies God because of the excellence and the usefulness that it provides for people. So that's kind of where I am right now in life. But yeah, that's a wild turn of events.
Amen. Oh, wow. I really love that quote. That's extremely powerful. And it's so funny because with our community, the Free Life Foundation community, business isn't just business as usual with us, as far as it's not secular business. Your business is your calling. And God carves us, He molds us. And so I've always thought that, it's the nature and nurture thing where God does instill you with certain things, like Paul and Kylie and everyone listening. You have something instilled in you from birth, like God made you in a very unique way. And then we go through things in life where we are grown, where we learn, where we discover certain aspects of us, where parts of us are carved. And a lot of times that's done through challenge, you know, sometimes it's done through incredible joy. As you know, I'm in Lake Como right now. So, I mean, so much of my growth and my relationship with God has come through travel. And you were talking about you figure out there's a day where you figure out why you were born. And that was one of the things God's called in me is faith and inspiration. And like when God says move, I move. And part of that has happened with travel. And so I've met thousands of people around the world essentially doing missionary work where they say, how do you do it? And my answer is God. Like you walk first, faith comes first, and then the other things come later. So you went through the schooling, you were going to go get your master's in clinical psychology and be doing more. My best friend was a clinical psychologist. Now she's a holistic healing coach that works for Team God. And it's a very powerful mission. And God rerouted you. He said, hey, let's go focus on business. So I remember part of your story in that when you got the reroute was that you had a call with someone we both know and love, a mentor of yours. And it was a fateful day. So I'd love to hear about that fateful day.
Yeah. So I was, just to rewind there, I finished all my education. I had a difficult time trying to find a job, and I'm moving to Virginia, right, and to start my doctorate in the fall. And so what was interesting was like I don't really know how all that's going to happen because you still have living expenses to pay for, and student loans will only cover so much. And so come July 27th, I call my mentor. And the reason I called him was simply to just do a check-in, right? Like, hey, like, pray for me. I'm moving to Virginia. And he tells me something crazy. He's like, hey, I want you to connect with this gentleman. I want you to go ahead and work in a sales company as a finance support person. And I'm like, okay, dude, like I did seminary education and now you're talking sales. I've never done sales and finance. That's the furthest thing from seminary, I would, at least at the time I thought. And then the next statement was, you're going to buy a house in December. And I'm like, what? Like, what the funny part about all that is at the time, right, I only had 63 cents in my account, right? And I was below the $1 threshold. And here he's like, yeah, you're going to get a house in 4 months. So I'm like, I'm not even sure how I'm going to pay rent come the end of September. The end of August, right? And you're talking about a house in December. Long story short, I did get a house in December, and I got my first one. Don't have 2 years of full-time employment history. Don't have the credentials or any of that stuff. But it happened, and what's funny is even though he said, you're going to get a house, right? I didn't just sit there and wish that it happened. Or, yeah, God's going to send an angel, some miracle will happen, I'll get a house. Or just pray about it, right? That's not what I did. Like, I land in Virginia, the first thing I do is I hit up Zillow, find a realtor, and go and start looking at houses, right? And the realtor's like, hey, like, do you have any money? I'm like, no. When do you plan to buy a house? December. And it looked like I lost my ever-loving mind, but I'm like, just watch, don't worry. And she couldn't believe it, right, at the speed at which it happened. And it's interesting because sales functioned as a gateway for me to enter into business. Because when I started in sales, I started as a support, and then I ended up running the entire department in a very little short time. And I realized like I not only like this, and it's weird, even the promotion didn't come because I was crying for leadership or trying to put myself out there like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, like trying to be showboating and make myself recognized so that they promote me. Rather, I just put my head down, worked, and was faithful in what God called me to do, and I provided value and service. And so, and then they, promoted me to run the whole department, and I'm like, wow, I'm honored, this is amazing. But along that journey, I started to figure out, like, I actually like creating systems and making operations run smoothly. That I guess you could say my knack is I could make something that's inefficient highly efficient, right? when I started this running the finance team, it had like a 60% efficiency rate where, if there's 100 deals, only 60 would actually go through. And by the time I left, it was like 90 plus in terms of efficiency. So my brain was wired to go and find the loopholes and weaknesses and pretty much neutralize that and make the process efficient and establish like the right systems in place. And the more I started doing that, I realized I enjoy this. I love the thrill of creating something. And there is a risk with that, right? It's not a salary. There isn't like a financial, a guarantee if I just go and I function as an employee in another company. But this came with massive risk. It came with the opportunity for me to put myself out there and be of as much value and service to other people. And the value, I always say this, value, money is simply a physical manifestation of something called value, right? Money, at the end of the day, you don't give $100 to get $100 back. No one gives paper for paper. You give paper to get a product back. What the product is, in your eyes, it's something called value attached to that. It's something you can't see. And so I put myself in a position to put value out there, and I realized like this is what I'm naturally wired for. And I finally felt that, you could say I kind of finally felt at home, right? I felt like I was in my groove. And the more I started to walk in that, I began to realize like it now was not only promotion, it was just leveling up. Here's someone that was in seminary now operating at an executive level at companies. And I'm like, dang, like I never thought I could do that, right? And it happened so quickly. The promotion came because of the gift, right? It says in the Bible, in Proverbs, it says, your gift will make room for you and bring you in the presence of great men. And that's the story. It's like, it's literally in the Bible. I always ask myself when I was in seminary, because I knew this verse, what is my gift? Right? Because I was like, I don't know what that gift is, because I'm not really moving the needle anywhere. But the evidence was right in front of me. I just was not looking. My ability to perform, me doing things that I was doing 10 years of schooling in 4, like it was right in front of me, but I wasn't seeing it because I was looking everywhere else. But what I was, and sometimes it's weird, right? We become so focused on looking out there, we don't look at what we're doing. That might actually reveal a lot about who we are. So that's the wild trajectory.
So good. Oh, you said so many things where I was going, okay, brain, please remember that. Please remember, because I wanted to touch on so many things that you shared. One of the main pieces that I'm hearing is that you didn't necessarily discover, it's like you discovered the gift, but once you discovered it, you realized it was already in front of your nose the whole time, right? So there is this aspect of, how can I say this? Okay, so you were talking about how your gift, you really sharpened that skill, or that gift, really. It's like you unwrapped the gift as you were walking the path. And this is something that, again, I find so inspiring about you and about many that are, everyone really that's walking the path of faith is something that you can't see. There's no evidence. If there were evidence, it would no longer be faith. And so I really imagine this path that God asks us to walk. Yes, we might have an idea of where we're headed, but it's one step at a time. It's a breadcrumb trail. It's from this stone to this stone to this stone. And we think that we might know where it's going, right? Like when you were going through school, you might think that you know where it's going, but then we might be on one stone going in a direction that we imagine we're heading, and then suddenly it's a pivot. It's a 90-degree turn and we're going somewhere else. And I just love that there's this grand orchestration where God's going, I got you. Like, I know. I think we've spoken about this before. I really feel my relationship with God a lot being like a GPS. And it's not with our eyes and our ears, like we're used to our Siri and our GPS talking to us, but we hear in a different sense. We see with our spiritual eyes. We hear with our spiritual ears of God directing us. And if God all of a sudden goes, stop right here, like slam on the brakes and turn right, that requires an incredible amount of faith to go, you got it, God. This going straight might have led to more money or more this or more this or more this, but my most important thing in my life is you. So I'm listening and I turn. And it's funny because we know in hindsight, being 2020, we can see, oh, that's why God had me take a hard right back there. Like slam on the brakes and make a 90-degree turn. I understand now. But in the moment, we're generally not given all of that information of why that's a necessary aspect of our faith. It could be he's trying to connect us with people or experiences, or maybe your husband or your wife, maybe your next client, maybe your next partner, maybe your next investor. Maybe it's like the opportunities are endless, but the experience of saying yes in faith is invaluable. And it's something that I appreciate about you so much, that you're willing to do that. So you shared a little bit about the story. I'm actually trying to remember if it was on this one or the last one. Did you share your story about the finances that you had in your bank account and when God gave you a promise for your home?
Yeah, so what's interesting is I think that's where the story, I shared it last time to briefly cover that. Like I was in a position and I was given this promise of you're going to get a house, right? And not really sure how it's going to happen. But long story short, it did happen. And like I went from 63 cents to making 5K a week, which I didn't even think was possible at the time because my mind was limited in thinking. And I thought 5K a month was a lot of money, and here I am making that every single week. And then boom, got my first house, and I just felt like it felt effortless to level up in life. And I'm like, dang, like I'm not even striving. Like people would go years to medical school or study law school to get a salary that's there, and I'm not even. I'm 21, and I'm just waddling into life. And like, what the funny part about this, Kylie, is I never even prayed for a house. I never even prayed once to get a house. I never even prayed once to get married or pray to get a good job or make a lot of money. That's the craziest part. Those were never on my prayer list. My prayer list was pretty much let me know God and be conformed to the image of the Son. And that was it. Right? I'm not, I mean, everything came, and I am a living, walking billboard of the fact that seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And when I see, and like, this is where, like, I see a lot of folks my age, right, in their early 20s, I see them pursuing the degree, pursuing the girl, pursuing the car, pursuing the house, pursuing the money, pursuing the career, and saving God for later. But when you get to a point in your life where you commit, I am going to put my youth on the altar. I'm going to put my vitality on the altar of God. And I'm going to give up the first fruits of my life, which is the best years of my life, my intelligence, my zeal, my drive, my passion, all of my capacities at the highest levels. I will submit that to God and let him do the rest. And that's where I feel like the magic, where was the magic? It was that. Like I did none of the stuff I have, strangely, I prayed for. And that is something that I strongly believe, and I encourage people is to pursue God. Those things will come. But what you'll find is in the pursuit of God that he is a lot better than all those things. They're good, they're nice, but the giver is better than the gifts, is what you discover on that journey.
Amen on that. Could not agree more. It's so funny because I feel like people walking the path with God, they ultimately come to this discovery. And so listening to things like this, it's the invitation to apply that sooner. And we even hear this from people in the business world, that creating a certain amount of wealth, it's not fulfilling unless you have God at the center. So back it up right now. The question is that the core focus of your life? And if it's not, it's funny because it's not that without God, you can't create financial wealth. We clearly see tons of examples of that in the world. Is it fulfilling? Are you fulfilled? Are you fulfilling your potential? Are you satisfied? Are you lit up? Are you whole? Do you feel enriched in your life? There are definitely, I feel weird calling them holes, but there are aspects where God can fill you up that literally nothing else could ever touch. Given all of your life experience, speaking to a community of God-centered entrepreneurs, like what is just, if you have a stage to share a message, what is the message that you feel like you really want to instill in faith-driven entrepreneurs, whether it be in business, in their faith, in their daily walk, in their habits, in their beliefs, in their actions? What do you got?
Yeah. So we're, given now that I'm on stage and I'm having an audience and I know what my audience is composed of, it makes it easier. But if I'm talking to an audience of Christian entrepreneurs and business owners, one of the things that I would communicate is essentially what, you mentioned earlier about this God-sized hole, right? And then the fact that God is the one who's able to fill that. And the story that came to my mind when you were saying that was everyone's probably heard this name, Steve Jobs, created Apple, was the CEO at Pixar Studios, and did so much. And his life ended early, I think, due to cancer diagnosis. What's interesting is I can see, I didn't know much about him in high school, right? Studied a lot later, but like I could see how, even without even knowing his narrative, I could see the end of my life from that angle. Because even though he did some amazing products, amazing success with his companies, he would take trips to, India and trying to find the spirituality and Buddhism and religion and all the success with Apple and all the success with these companies and all that. So what I found so interesting was that even though I didn't know about a story, I saw that end. Just setting another goal, fulfilling that, going and building another mission, fulfilling that, going and expanding this company and fulfilling that. And because, God has created us in one sense to be creators, right? We can go and create. We can go and make great things. And it says in the Bible, like when God was doing the flood, he says, these people, if they put their mind to it, nothing can stop them, right? God is aware of the capacity that he has instilled in us as, being made in his image. So the matter is not whether you can go and create another business and go and do something successful. Like I actually believe that you can go and do that, right? Even if you don't agree with what I say, I do believe that you can still go and do that. But like, you can ask someone, it's like, oh, would you like to have been the Steve Jobs of the generation? Like, heck yeah. But would you like to experience the hard turmoil that he probably experienced? Right? And that's the part we overlook as entrepreneurs. We want our business to do well. We want to take off. We want to be successful. We want the lights, camera, and the action. But anything that's done outside of the pursuit of God, you will find yourself in a meaningless pursuit of just another goal, just another business, just another trophy, of just another sales award, and it's not going to fulfill. And so for that audience, what I would say is get the priorities right, because one day we all have a date with eternity and that we must show up to, and no one can show up late, right? There's this amazing poem that I remember listening to for the longest time, and it was the idea that in 100 years from now, it won't matter whether you slept on the fanciest bed or slept on a floating wooden pallet, right? Because we all have a day with eternity that we must show up for. And it doesn't matter whether you ate big, steaks or beans. And this is a date that no one can miss. And so I recognized at a very early stage in my life that my life is over in a flash. It's here one moment and it's gone. And the fragility of life, and this is something like, if anyone is hearing this, the fragility of life gets you to reconsider your priorities, right? If you consider this life is over in a flash, one day I get to leave, and all the stuff that the wealth that I hoarded up, I probably can't even keep it. You start to think there is a life to come, right? There is life after death. If anything, the near-death experience as a whole domain in scientific research in the past 40 years has revealed is that consciousness does continue after death. Is how can I prepare for that life? And the one thing I read, and I've read countless near-death experiences in the span of the past 6 years, and the one thing that I have come across is this common denominator that the only thing that you remember is the things that you did. You'll remember your life, but the only things that you remember or count are the things that you did for God. That's all that you get to remember and you get to keep. It is true in the Bible, right? It says that God will blot everything out. The former things shall not even come to remembrance. That's a profound thought. And it's like, so for an entrepreneur, for someone that's in business, for someone that is a Christian in that space, it's get the priorities right, seek first the kingdom of God, his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And when you seek him, you begin to discover who you are, because he is the only one that can give you the name, because that's why it says identity has to be the name that God calls you. But if you're not near him, you probably won't hear him calling you. So when you get close to him, you hear what he calls you, and you encounter that experience. I am the multiplier. I am the person that sows joy. You hear the name because you got close to him. And then you start fulfilling from that place. Not only are you fulfilling your eternal calling on your life, but you're also storing up for yourself treasures in heaven, because on this journey called life, as you are fulfilling what your maker has created you to do, you will be at the right places at the right time, having the right conversations, engaging in the right activities. That is storing up for treasures in heaven. And one day when you do come before your maker, you are in a position to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy that was prepared for you before the foundations of the earth. And that only comes from people that know the name that God calls them. And that name is only heard when you're near him. So that would be my big message, I guess, if you want to put it like that, to Christian entrepreneurs.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.